Hello, philosophers and scholars of religion. I'm just going to give a little overview here of the essay questions for our in-class final. That's happening on May 24th. 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. is the allotted time. You may not need all that time, but you certainly have it. And that's going to be in our normal room. So I'll see you on the 24th. I'm going to look through the general directions, and I'm going to give a little overview of each of the essay topics, give you a little bit of guidance on the kinds of things you might already be working on. That might be helpful, might give you some guidance or structure, something like that. Alrighty, so we can see here just some information about the final. It's in class. Really, it's going to be just like the last one we did, but only on the second half material. It's not going to be cumulative. Sometimes I do a cumulative exam, sometimes I don't. This semester, we're just going to keep it on the second half material. And like last time, there will be 25 multiple choice questions and one essay topic that you select from the list. And just like last time, we will give you the whole list, and you can select the one that you want to write on. Hopefully that should give you a lot of time to prepare in advance, a good essay that you bring with you in your brain, and write a nice polished essay. So you'll have all of the questions in advance, and in addition, the things to bring would include Scantron, the kind of narrow, longer Scantron, just like last time, same one, and a large green book. You get both of those things in the university bookstore. I believe they're kept behind the counter now, and you just ask them. They're relatively cheap. And okay, so each of those sections is worth 50 points for a total of 100 points for the exam as a whole. So that means it's equal in weight points to the midterm. So there are two equally weighted exams. Okay, so I'm going to go through the essay topics now, some of them a little bit quicker than others, and just to kind of give you some guidance. Really, the main thing that you want to be focusing on is going back over the course material. Some of the things that you wrote your philosophy pages on, for example, might be relevant to one or more of these topics. It might turn out that a topic that you didn't write a philosophy page on is more to your interest, and but you've got should have a good number of course resources that you can go back over as your main source of preparing for the essay here. I'll just give you some thoughts that might be helpful. Okay, so number one here is interreligious comparison. So that's as distinct from an intra-religious comparison. This is just an interreligious comparison. So what that means is that is to compare the worldview of one monotheistic religion we have covered in the class with another religion we have covered in class. So that's basically the kind of thing that you were asked on one of the midterm essay questions. So this is pretty similar to that one. And as I say, this can be either monotheistic, polytheistic, Eastern or Western. So you really have the full range of the courses, religions that we've studied in this course that you can choose from. So to compare it, and here's the important part. Compare at least two elements of their respective worldviews. So each of them has a worldview that's defined in the Young text, and he clearly lays out the worldview elements. So compare at least two elements of their respective worldviews. By that I mean, take for example each of their conceptions of human nature and compare, for example, Taoism and Buddhism on how they view human nature according to their worldviews. And it might also be the nature of the sacred is one of the other elements of the worldview. You could compare them as that being the second element of the worldview that you compare. So two different religions, but according to the same type of worldview element. So I want you to be doing that. So that should give you a nice, clear basis to either, as the question continues, argue whether the two religions are fundamentally at odds or in agreement with respect to these elements of their worldview. So, roughly, do we see more similarities, differences, maybe some of each, and get into some detail of at least one similarity and one difference. I mean, I guess it could be two similarities, but more importantly, what I'm trying to emphasize here is really pause on at least one point of comparison here and really get into detail on something. And that's really for all of the essay topics. That will be a general criteria that we'll want to see in all of them, is that you go into depth and detail at some point about something in the process of answering the question. So that gives you a level of thoroughness, and that's definitely one of the criteria that all the essays will be looked at in terms of. So you want to avoid kind of quickly skipping through the topics. Even if you do that in an introduction part of an essay, you wouldn't want to do that the whole way through it, right? At some point, you need to give it a focus and a definition and really get into depth on some relevant aspect. And that's kind of your choice to make. It's one of your probably most important choices to make as the quote author of these essays, is what point to make salient in your way of answering this question, right? We've got 61 people in the class, I think, are enrolled, and 61 people could make 61 different things salient in the particular way they go about answering the same question. So make sure you do that. Okay, so we compared them. Now we say draw upon Jung's account of human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy in chapter 1. So this should be familiar to you. We've kind of gone back to this a number of times as our kind of organizing concept of how we would see the spiritual life according to each of the religions is like, what story did they have to tell about the nature of human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy. And I'm here asking you to compare the two religions that you have been comparing and contrasting here and their worldviews, now comparing them with respect to the conception of human transformation they embody. And there's a lot of different ways that you can address that. And I think that should be creative and interesting, and hopefully you can find something that actually really engages you in describing the way in which, say, Hinduism or Christianity or Islam, Judaism, embody a conception of fundamental human transformation. So take that as an opportunity to kind of say something interesting, but also really tied to specific facts about these worldviews that you had earlier been discussing. So that's really where we also would look for cohesion between the kind of factual stuff about the comparison of the worldviews, and now something that's more interpretive about, well, what conception of human transformation or responsibility do we have here? But that description should be to some extent shaped by the more descriptive part of the worldview element comparison. So I'm kind of going on here a little bit because that's the same kind of thing that really will, I think, creep up for most of these essays. Same kind of like internal cohesion between different parts of the essay. The more you can do that, the better essay it is. So yeah, and going over this first question, I might emphasize a few things that would be applicable to all of them, and then I'll probably be a little quicker through some of the others, but I just want to be helpful. So now I'm asking you to make an argument. And this is another thing that we're going to look for, like, boom, did you make an argument? And that's going to be true for almost all of these, I think. They ask you to make a case, make an argument, defend a thesis, something like that. So we should be able to clearly see you doing that at some point in your answer. Okay, so what am I asking you to do? An argument with respect to the broader understanding of human transformation and spirituality involved in the two religions, make the same kind of argument. Okay, so then give your finishing perspective in a way that draws upon some specific points noted above. So at the end here, just kind of wrapping things up in a kind of like all things considered, big picture. Where does this all leave you or lead you, so to speak? Um, okay, so let's go ahead to the next one here. This is going to be number 2, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. So I kind of like this essay topic, I guess why I have it, but I also have some uneasiness with it in some ways about exactly what, being able to describe exactly what this question is requiring of you, so to speak. It's kind of a pretty open question, so I do that with some hesitancy because we want to have like kind of like clear rubrics and structures and all that. But I think it's also good to give people opportunities for a kind of analytical creativity, not just creative writing, but being analytical yet also creative. And I think this question kind of meets that desiderata, one might say. So I would say for this one, if you feel like you've got a clear enough understanding on your own of kind of like how you would really fit 2 or more of these figures into what this question's asking you, and you can be pretty self-directed in doing this comparison, that might be good. More so than if you were feeling like you would really need very clear directions for each section of the paper. Some of the other topics are phrased in such a way that they have more of that. So I think just as a general thing there. So I'm asking you to compare and contrast 2 of these 3 figures above, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. I selected them because they're kind of individuals that we really associate with given religions. We could have put Lao Tzu in there too, but very little is known about Lao Tzu. Um, so comparing. So in what respect do we want to compare and contrast them? So it says using information about their lives as people and their foundational role in a religion, their respective religion, and here we have bolded, apply Jung's account of human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy in chapter 1 in order to explain how each presents a paradigm of spiritual achievement and as a religious leader. And I think I might add here a paradigm of like individual spiritual achievement and as a more like public social role as a religious leader. So, what important similarities or differences do we find in their religious quests, accomplishments, and hardships? What do we learn by looking at their lives or who they were as people? How do they, okay, go on to ask, how do they have such an impact? So, it's kind of giving like, guiding questions here. As you can tell, there's like, a lot of different ways you might go in pursuing any of these questions. And you might find that, let's say if you were getting really into this topic and you found yourself really going into detail and interesting ways on one of these questions, and you might not have enough time or something like that to get one of the other ones. It's not so much that each one of these questions is going to be checked off as like, did you do exactly that? But that these are the kinds of questions that you'd want to be pursuing in achieving that comparison in the bolded terms there about how they each embody this kind of human transformation of ultimacy and that. So you might ask yourself slightly different questions that ends up leading you in a really interesting direction. And like I was saying at the beginning, if you feel confident that you're doing that in ways that are really grounded and kind of objectively grounded in the text, and that could be from either of our 2 texts, then that seems good to me. As long as you feel like you're carving out a pretty clear theme. That's a thing that might be difficult to do here, and it's kind of the challenge. And for people that do select this, we will have that in mind, that you have picked a question where you have to kind of define the theme a little bit more so than the others. But some of us might relish that opportunity, and some of us might pass on it. And in that spirit, I'm going to pass on to the next one. This is a moral issues within religion. I have to take a look here and make sure that I've kind of got the right moral issues. But basically, this question will apply to any of the moral issues that we've covered in class. I do recall now that there was a reading on euthanasia, I believe, that we didn't end up covering because we got behind on something. So we ended up going on a didn't do that too much. So you can totally do this question with respect to euthanasia. I don't think I have it typed up as such, but I'll announce here that you can certainly do that. And I'll take a look here. Right, chapter on, it says explain critically and examine two religious perspectives on either of the issues in chapter 18 of our text, that being the status of women and homosexuality. I think I actually have that title incorrectly typed there. My apologies for that. This question needs a little bit of emendation on the wording, so let me just kind of do that verbally here, and I'll go back and just kind of make any just a slight change. It's small because the reason being that we covered the status of women in the first half of the semester, so I should actually have not included that. So really this should just be on topic of homosexuality, and we also had a reading on euthanasia. So if we can kind of mentally amend this question as such, I'll put in the typed amendments on our iLearn. So apologies there, but I'll go ahead and explain what's going on here. This is basically identical to the same type of question we had on offer for the midterm. So same deal. Basically going to give a moral argument. So select one of those issues, either euthanasia or sexual orientation, and explain the most important dimensions of the issue itself. So here, this is kind of like not so much within a specifically religious context, but why is this an important moral issue? What makes it important? What are the moral dimensions of it? Give us a little feel and characterize this particular moral issue. There's plenty of moral issues. What's unique about this and what makes it moral in the first place, or just significant to human life? So, and the two religious perspectives on the issue. So if you remember these chapters, there's like fairly short, kind of medium discussions of quite a number of different religious perspectives on that one same issue. So here I'm just saying from those select any two, and they don't have to be two religions that we have gone over in the class. So that actually might give you some opportunity to investigate a religion that we didn't cover as one of like the big main ones. So then again, it could be totally up to your selection here. Tell us what's distinctive about each perspective. There's got to be at least something that differentiates the two. They couldn't be exactly the same. I wouldn't think. So find something distinctive about them that really kind of characterizes accurately the general perspective that the different principles discussed are defending or supporting. Also, where do we see congruence? There certainly is going to be some kinds of overlaps in ways that people address moral issues, even if they do come from pretty different backgrounds and ideologies even. There can be overlapping areas of consensus that are maybe cashed out in different ways. So where do we see congruence, disagreement, what's distinctive? So at this point, you're basically expositing, we might say. This is the expository part of your essay. You're just kind of laying out the issues and really kind of doing justice to the positions on these moral issues that they really embody. So it's a kind of descriptive aspect here. But now we're going to shift gears and just say explain which religious perspective provides the best approach to the issue in your judgment and why you believe so. So I've italicized that. because basically you really need to be making an argument here, and you might think of yourself as kind of functioning in the role of a judge, something like that, where you have to kind of just evaluate the two cases that are put in front of you, um, and render a judgment as to which of them makes the better case. And I will ask you to really come in favor of one. It's not so much that you have to be against the other, but I mean, that's up to you how to do it. But I'm going to ask you to really come out and clearly defend some particular position. I will say that you can give a modified defense in some ways, but do come out with a kind of a clear conclusion, clear argument in favor of one, just not necessarily being better, but just a maybe more either illuminating a treatment of it, maybe even just more illuminating in some particular aspect, or that it might be a more practical approach. It's more easy to implement and get people to actually go along with and thus generate real social change, or could be other things. So it doesn't have to be a kind of like necessarily better than kind of judgment, but preferable in some important kind of way. So here we go. Finally, state and support what you believe is the best, or at least an important, position to take in this discussion. State the position and the supporting reasons as clearly as you can. So this is asking for your personal, quickly, so I say state and support, but quickly is a kind of concluding thing, what kind of all things considered your position is here, and give quickishly, but you can go into some detail there, some supporting reasons for your position. Those supporting reasons might come from the religion that you defended above, or they might not. So this is a chance for you to state your view with some reasons, and it may or may not turn out to connect with one or both of the religions that you were asked to evaluate here. That just, you kind of see how that goes. It's fine either way. What's important is that you do, in some sense, really give your own argument, your own position, even if there is some connection to the other religions. Don't just completely fall back on or rely on that in the process of giving your own supporting reasons. At least like put it in your own words, your own terms, or some kind of modification you might suggest. So make it yours. Own it, as they might say. Okay, that is getting us to, appropriately enough, not quite the last slide, the second to last slide, is the meaning of life. So here, let's see, this is basically looking at the question, the meaning of life, which we spent the last class period talking about in a fairly direct way, from Robert Nozick. But we also can enter the philosopher Nietzsche, and we read and had a good discussion on his little piece, The Three Metamorphoses. And basically the kind of general thing of this question, I think, is probably an attractive question for a number of us. Broadly speaking, here we're wanting to look at differences in the way that theists and, let's say, non-theists approach issues of the meaning of life. How life becomes meaningful, what kind of lives are meaningful ones, in virtue of what are meaningful lives meaningful, and stuff like that. So we probably all think about this at some level. So what kind of light is shed on the meaning of life under theism? What kind of light is shed on the meaning of life under atheism, if any? That's I think another thing that's kind of really essential here to the question is that there's a long-standing issue as to whether or not atheists can really explain even the possibility of a meaningful life if the universe itself is meaningless. There's no God, according to the atheist, so there's no meaning giver in any straightforward sense. in which under theism there really is. It seems to be in a pretty straightforward sense, just a meaning giver of the universe, at least certainly in the Western Abrahamic monotheistic traditions that we've been looking at. And that might be one of the appealing things about them, is because the universe was created by a rational God or a sentient God. We can kind of easily see it as a place of meaning. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to live a meaningful life, but we can easily enough understand the possibility of doing so. But you can see, if you take out God from the picture, how do you even make it possible? So, of course, atheists like Nietzsche have risen to the challenge. And I'm asking here. So this is going back to the reading that's posted on iLearn on the Three Metamorphoses, and asking you to, like, how can we really see life as meaningful if there is no God to give it meaning according to Nietzsche? Also, when we look at the Three Metamorphoses, which is so interesting, I think, because it is exactly a tale of human transformation, what conception of human transformation is really embodied in that little piece, the Three Metamorphoses from Nietzsche? That's, I think, an interesting question, and that should give us the atheist's answer, or at least one atheist's answer. So you want to take some time and, I guess, really get into the question of, I guess, two things here to kind of boil it down a little bit. I'm allowing you to enter in some discussion of the New Atheists also. That came up in class a bit, and they're kind of like a well-known group, I suppose, somewhat controversial. But don't do that instead of Nietzsche all the way through. Make sure you get Nietzsche at some point, and you can see these other parts of the question. But you can bring in like Richard Dawkins or Daniel Dennett sometimes is included. Sam Harris is pretty interesting. So, getting back here, when you compare this to the way one of the religions we have covered would answer the question, what is the meaning of life? So now we're comparing Nietzsche, maybe with a little voice from the New Atheists, on how they would answer the question, to how one of the religions we've studied, and this should be one of the ones that we have covered, would answer that question. And that's, I think, no easy question to answer, actually. Not only the question, what is the meaning of life, is no easy question, but what answer to that question could we see as being given by, quote, a religion? I mean, a religion is a huge, diverse thing that changes over time and geography and place and different sects and factions and stuff like that. Is there a single univocal answer that we could attribute to it? Maybe not, but I guess what I would want you to do is try to pick out one kind of answer that the religion you look at could give. It doesn't necessarily have to be what every member of that religion would agree is the meaning of life, but here's a pretty text-based account of what one of the religions we studied could say as an answer to that question. And you can cite some sources in the kind of worldview or something like that. So here are the end, religious similarities, differences, kind of things I've been asking you to do. This is a comparative course, so all the way through you always have in mind the kind of spirit of what we might call comparative analysis, which in some way or other I think all of these are asking you to do. So what similarities or differences do you see? And how would you differentiate the two? Maybe we'll just add kind of informally at the end of this to give a short statement of your answer to the question independently of the sources in the text. I think I had kind of intended to sneak that into the wording, but let's consider it as such. So give us your quick, but with a little bit of reason, answer to the question on your own. What would you say? Alrighty, finally, and actually this one will be short because it's the exact same question as number one. However, as I say here, the path less traveled. It's just me trying to come up with a cute name or something. As I say here, essentially the same as one, but the only difference being that you select one religion we have covered and one religion we've not covered. So that gives you the opportunity to study, get into a religion we've not covered in class. And there's lots of great, interesting religions covered in the Young text. And here I'm actually thinking of the Young text because we want something kind of clear, straightforward that we can both kind of have as our basis of information. And the Armstrong text is fabulous and amazing, but it's not exactly that. It's a treasure trove of information, but it's not laid out in a textbooky form. So here I'm going to ask you to kind of draw on Young, although, if you want to add a little bit of something from Armstrong that's not like, you can't say anything about it, but do base this on what we got in Young. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for now. I hope that was helpful, and the other part is just a matter of going through the multiple choice questions. Like last time, there will be some questions taken from the quizzes that we've done. And since we've got 30 questions in our quizzes, there'll be a decent amount that I can take from there. And I will take a few, I'll put a few on there that weren't on the quizzes. But yeah, those are, I think, pretty self-directed, those things there, just through the chapter. And most people seem to be doing pretty decently on the quizzes. They're straightforward and just kind of to reward a certain kind of diligent work if you do it. So those will just be answered. I'll pick 25 questions from those that appear on the study guide, and just like last time. Okay, so hopefully that was it, and hopefully that was helpful.